Without further ado, I'd like to call up Neil Peterson. Neil and I want to welcome up Dolf. Neil and I have had a long-term friendship since, Neil, about 2007. And Neil is the owner and publisher of Real Estate Investor magazine. We've recently become business partners. And I went to America in 2010 because it's pretty obvious that there was an opportunity in America. But in 2010, I went there for 5 weeks, all over the place. I was in an event just like this in 2009 where it sounded bloody brilliant, but we always go and check it out. And I came home with my tail between my legs. In 2012, Brendan, Neil, and myself tried again. We went back. We did 8 cities in 11 days, but we went with a different strategy. We went to go and find the best partners. And one of the partners that's a good friend of Neil's, and subsequently I'd like to believe is a good friend of mine, is Dr. Dolf de Roos, my number one mentor in real estate on this planet. I read his book when I was 19 years old. I applied his strategies, and from my perspective, I got my first success at 22 in South Africa. I did my first development in South Africa at 22. I did my first London development when I was 24. And people might say that book was written 15 or 20 years ago, but the principles stand the test of time. And so from my perspective, I wanted to hand over to Neil to welcome up Dolf, to explain a little bit about who he is and the value that we can experience and get from him by partnering with one of the best people on the planet. So over to you, Neil.
Great. Thanks, Scott. I think, I'm really excited when I come to events like this. My exciting thing working with Scott is that when I work with somebody at 100 miles an hour is really up with the market, is that I really get good information as a journalist. I pick up the best information that's available. And that's what Real Estate Investor magazine is all about. Many years ago when I met Dolf, he was actually instrumental in helping me meet the right partners. And Scott is talking about all the right partners and all these different things to be able to launch a magazine in South Africa. So I just want to thank Dolf for putting me onto the right partners. And that just deserves a little bit of a round of applause. Don't you think? You guys are great. So really, that was a partnership which came about, which launched the birth of this magazine. Now, where we're very different to other magazines, in the market, is that we're at the forefront. Most newspapers, other magazines, or all your general magazines that you see on the shelf, tend to be, they're trying to sell magazines. That's their purpose. Our purpose is to educate investors, to give you the best information at the forefront of investing. Now, the particular trip that we did with Scott and Brendan was this. It ended in this particular story. A lot of people took action, Scott, on the investments here. And in fact, we've actually, all the motley crew you're going to see today, RJ and what have you, there's a wonderful picture. Don't you want to just turn to where the door kicking episode? It was such a wonderful shot, and I thought, well, why don't we call it, how to break into the US market. And you're going to meet RJ a little bit later over there, but that's him over there. That's him in real life action. How to break into the US market. And let me tell you what, a lot of people have with absolute great success. That's where it starts. It starts with the whole education process of reading, finding who those partners are, and then starting to take action.
And just as my interest, we're not here to sell you anything. If you run to the back of the room and buy a book today, you get 2 VIP seats to watch the Stormers play rugby on the weekend. We're evolving something. We're taking the best that Dolf has, we're taking the best that we have, we're taking the best that Neil's got, and some other partners. We're putting it all on a digital platform where you will have access to the best information, not even retrospectively, but proactively going forward. Mixture between webinars, events, seminars, the latest, all the workings, the software, everything in one place. And again, it's not about selling you something, it's about educating you so you can make informed decisions so that you can decide where you want to partner and who you want to partner with. The bottom line is that Dolf is going to set the platform for where we are today, what we want to achieve, and most importantly, how you can benefit from it. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome up the most recognized person in international real estate, Dr. Dolf de Roos.
And thank you too, Scott, for having me here. It's a real pleasure. I love it here, folks. I post to Instagram every now and then, and the photos you get here in South Africa are some of the best you'll get anywhere in the world. It's just delightful. And intelligent people. I want to acknowledge the fact that you're here. What is it today? Tuesday morning? You could have been at work watching TV at home. Well, then you're better off being here. You could have been at work staying, playing golf, doing things with the family. So our task is to make the time you've invested here worthwhile. And I just want to acknowledge that. So I know that we're tasked with something that's pretty important to you. But I want to start off talking not about the nitty-gritty, because I can talk for 3 days. In fact, I do put on 3-day events on real estate. And I'll do an information dump where I'm hoping you'll learn all the facts and figures and little things you need to know in order to do extraordinarily well in real estate. And often that's what people come for. But I'd been teaching this for about 15 years. And by the way, for the record, I never set out to be a real estate teacher, nor did I ever set out to be a real estate author. In fact, I'm an accidental author, because how that came about is I was once asked to share some thoughts on real estate to a bunch of real estate agents or estate agents. And they said, would you share what you're doing, because you just keep buying property after property, and if we can figure out your strategy, maybe we can help sell you some of them. And I thought, well, that sounds good, and the good Lord knows that agents need a bit of education, so I thought, all right, I'll go and share this. So I went one Thursday night, and I just did my thing, nothing prepared. I've never had anything prepared, by the way. I have an aversion to having things prepared for 2 reasons. If I had notes to come along with, and then I lost the notes, what on earth would I talk about then, right? But have you ever been to an event where people say, well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's such an honor to be here in Durban. Oh, excuse me. Or Johannesburg. Or, it's just speak from the heart. So I've never had notes. So I never had notes then. And I gave this talk, and they said, wow, that was great. Would you mind coming along again next Thursday? And I was honored. I thought, well, that's pretty nice. So I said, sure. So I went along the next Thursday, and I gave essentially the same talk. And they said, that was great. Would you mind coming along again next Thursday? And I thought, there's a pattern going on here. Making mistakes is good, but repeating them is silly, right? We learn from our mistakes, but not if you repeat them. So I thought, well, I'll just write down what I said, and then I can hand it out, and I only need to do it once. Well, I kept writing and writing and writing, never thought I was an author, and it ended up being my first book. And I took it to the bookstores to see if they wanted to stock it, and they said, no, it's a niche market. Why would we wouldn't sell any? And I believed them. So I never went back to them. But it sold so well just by word of mouth and the underground and everything that after 2 years, the bookstores came to me and said, I think we've made a mistake. Would you mind if we sold them? And I didn't say, I told you so, or no. I still believed their first version. So I said, okay. And anyway, I've ended up being a New York Times bestseller, which is kind of the holy grail of being an author, but I still don't consider myself an author. And I don't consider myself a teacher. What I do in the world is I invest in real estate. And I'm willing to take a day off investing today in order that I can share something what I can do in the hope that some of you, hopefully more than a couple, will actually take action. And we were down in Cape Town, and Neil took me to see a person who'd been along at an event, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and he was just starting out, didn't believe everything he heard, but he took it on board, bought a swag of my products, and he read the books over and over and listened to the audios. I'm not suggesting you should do this. But he now owns commercial buildings and billboards and built his own home with the most intricate modern gadgets in it, and I'm a bit of a gadget freak, so it was just a delight to see. And he credits it all to having followed me. In fact, I was called once by A-Rod, and I don't know if you guys, do you know who A-Rod is? You do? Well, I had no idea. And the girls in the office went weak in the knees and said, it's A-Rod calling for Dolf. And I said, which guy would call himself a rod unless he had an inferiority complex, So I took the call, and he said, hey, how'd you like to come to my game in Houston this weekend? And I thought, he's a sports player. I said, I'm sorry, I've got an event on in Seattle. He said, well, how about next weekend in New York? I said, I'm in San Diego. And one day he called and said, I see you're doing an event in Dallas, Texas. I said, yes, I am, at the Intercontinental. He said, well, I live in Dallas. And I felt like saying, well, I live in Phoenix, but I didn't. And I figured, because he's a player and he sounded like an African-American to me, I thought he's a tall, black basketball player. And you know how when you have a theory, you'll always find evidence to support your theory. So my theory that he was a tall black basketball player just got enhanced and enhanced. Anyway, he ended up meeting me the Monday after the event. In fact, I came out of a TV show, and his bodyguard took me to his home, and I was sitting on the couch next to the bodyguard. And this guy walks up, and the bodyguard elbows me and says, that's him. I said, that's who? He said, that's A-Rod. I said, no, A-Rod's black. And he heard me. And I said, the next thing you're going to tell me is you're not a basketball player. He said, no, I'm a baseball player. Well, he's the world's highest paid sports person to this day. All right, so I get tracked down by people that I'm not even sure who they are because I'm not into that. I'm into doing deals. So anyway, I was teaching this stuff for 15 years, and I thought I'm going to find out how many of my students end up doing extraordinarily well, say becoming a dollar millionaire within 18 months or something. So we created the survey and sent it out, and full of enthusiasm, I waited for the results to come in. And when they did, I was devastated because it was fewer than 4%, and in my mind, that wasn't even statistically significant, meaning probably 4% would have stumbled across money, marrying into it, winning the lottery, or you know how some people make $1 million? They take their dad's big fortune and turn it into a small fortune, you know, but they still have $1 million. So I wasn't impressed with that, and I beat myself up, and I thought, I'm going to find out, why is it that when you give people all the information that you think they need to become fabulously wealthy, they still don't do it? And I took a leave of absence from everything I was doing. That's one of the great things about not having a job. You're not accountable to anyone. And so I didn't know how long it would take. It ended up taking 11 months, and I believe I cracked it. I read all the great books on it, you know, the Maxwell Maltz's Psycho-Cybernetics and David Schwartz's The Magic of Thinking Big, 210 books. I met with a lot of people, the likes of Jim Rohn and Vic Conant and you know, all the people that you know of. I worked with Tony Robbins for years teaching at Wealth Mastery, and I was just trying to figure this one out. And I believe I cracked it, and it has nothing to do with the information or the rate of speech or the accent that you have or the sequence that you deliver it in, but it has everything to do with the subconscious mind of the investor. And I know this sounds like, yeah, we've heard that, get on to the nitty-gritty. But I've found out that unless you crack this, you'll never make it big. To the extent that I now even run weekend events, there's not a picture of them, I don't have any on the calendar, called The Psychology of Creating Wealth. And what we do there is we go inside everyone's subconscious mind, with their willing permission, of course, and figure out what are the tapes that you've got running on in your mind that stop you from doing really great things. You know, another way of putting it is, what would you dare to try if you knew you couldn't fail? And as Scott said, why is it that, 20 people in that room took action when they heard the rand was going to change, and 180 didn't? What makes the difference between those people? And we don't have time to do that weekend event, but I can run an exercise in probably 7.5 minutes, which will encapsulate what I do during the weekend and where we get these results. And by the way, when I incorporate the psychology of creating wealth into my real estate teachings and then run the survey again, the success rate goes from under 4% to over 80%. Does that excite you? Sure. Well, you should let your faces know, because you're all looking at me as if, no, you're looking at me as if I'm from a foreign planet. So I can do in 7 or 8 minutes the essence of what I do during an entire weekend. Do you want to go through that exercise? Yes. Oh, before I ask, I should say, it involves something that you think you like, but you may not like, and I'm talking about cold, hard cash. Do you still want to do it? All right, well, let's do it. And by the way, proof that the psychology is so important is the fact that when you win the lottery these days, do you have a lottery here in South Africa? What do you win when you win? 10,000 rand? No, how much? Nothing? Oh, whatever the number, rand is not worth anything. No, how much? 20 million? Around the world, it's in the tens of millions. In America, it's tens of millions. An 18-year-old lass just won a $98 million lottery. 4 people recently shared a $600 million lottery. You win tens and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. And yet, statistically, in the United States, France, Germany, every Western nation, within 5 years of winning the lottery, financially, the winners are back to where they were before they won. Why is it that when you give people tens of millions, they squander it? And how can I hope to teach people how to make millions when I know that if I give you millions, 4 out of 5 of you will squander it? And I know exactly what you're thinking. Try me. Give me tens of millions. Even if I do squander it, it will have been fun. But that's not the point. Psychologically, we get rid of it. And why is that? Very briefly, because we're brought up on this basis that money is the root of all Evil. We all have heard that, and there's always someone who puts his own, but Dolf, but the full saying in the Bible is, for the love of money is the root of all evil, and there's a big difference between the two. Well, there is a big difference between the two, but the problem is your subconscious mind doesn't know that difference. It hears money and evil in the same sentence and makes that connection over and over again. You say, Mom or Dad, can I have a bicycle? As a kid, and they say, what do you think, kid, that money grows on trees? In other words, money is hard to come by. And if you haven't worked hard for it, you don't deserve it. And money can't buy you happiness. And it is easier to get a camel through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. In other words, if you're rich, you're condemned to hell. I know that's not what the Bible says, but that's what the subconscious think. How do we describe the rich? They are so rich, they are filthy rich. They're so rich, they're stinking rich. We associate being rich with filth and stench. So here's this poor, sweet, innocent, kind, gentle, loving, caring lottery winner, 21 years old, who just won $58 million. She's over the moon. She celebrates. She has a bit too much to drink. She says, I'm going to get a new car. I'm going to tell my boss where to shove it. I'm free for the rest of my life. And life is looking good. But at the same time, she now thinks she's a little bit evil because she's got all this money. And she's not going to be very happy because money can't get you happiness. And she hasn't worked for it, so she doesn't really deserve it. And she's not going to go to heaven, and to cap it all off, she's filthy and she stinks. And the only way to solve this, at a subconscious level, is to divest yourself of that money. And it's not as if you write out a check and give it to one person, but you make silly decisions, give a car to a second cousin twice removed that you've never seen, but you take pity on them. And you give it to charities that you know doesn't really end up with the right people. And 5 years later, you've got nothing, you're poor, and you're happy, and you're clean, and you don't stink anymore. And then they come to an event to figure out how to make more money. So we're trying to break that cycle. And we break that cycle by doing all these different things in a weekend. But I want to go through in essence. One of my theories is that if you want to be rich, you have to carry a lot of money on your person. Who has a lot of money on your person right now? Say 10,000 rand or more. And you don't want to admit it in this country, okay? No, most of you don't. And why not? Why don't you have a lot of money on you right now? Someone. You must have a reason. If you don't volunteer, I'll pick volunteers. Yes, sir.
Somebody's stealing from you.
Pardon?
Don't need to carry cash.
Don't need to carry cash. That is so true. Why would we need cash? We don't need it. Good answer. Someone else. I mean, why don't you have money on you? Sir.
Bank card.
Bank card. Yes, plastic, fantastic. I don't need money. I can whip out that card and it's good for anything. Identity theft and all, but never mind. Yes, so someone else. Why don't you have cash on you?
I don't have it.
I don't have it. Sir, let's give him a round of applause. He's on the right event today. Yes. You have come to the right place. Thank God you're not watching TV today. Someone else. Why don't you have cash on you? Ma'am.
Every time kids for study notes.
That would have been a great answer if you hadn't laughed at the end. You know, it's not a joke. That's a good thing to do. Yeah. All 18 of them? 2. Okay, that's good. Someone else. Come on. Yes.
We don't feel safe carrying money.
We don't feel safe carrying money. That's kind of a valid reason, a bit more so than in some places. Like in Japan, you can have wads of cash on you. They use credit cards much. And if you drop it on the street, someone will come up scurrying after you and say, sir, you dropped your money. Most people say, well, I might spend it. Who's concerned a bit about spending it? No one is willing to admit it. Or I might lose it. And if you don't spend it or lose it, then you might have it stolen from you. By the way, if you're going to have it stolen anyway, spend it first. Well, I believe in having lots of cash. What's the highest denomination in South Africa? 1,000? 200. 200. Like $20. All right. Well, in America, it's not very big. It's only $100. I like Europe, where you get 1,000 euro notes, although the banks are trying to reduce them, but 500s are still common. So I have here some $100 notes, and I want someone to verify that it's a real one. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin, yes. Yes, I was in New Zealand once as a kid, and there was a competition, and we have native New Zealand birds in all the banknotes. And they said, which native bird is on the $20 note? And I was thinking and thinking, and I thought I came up with a very creative answer, because I turned it over. I said Queen Elizabeth. And I was banned from the competition. I thought it was a valid answer. It's like they asked the kid in one competition, what's a Puma? And he said, it's a brand of running shoes. And the answer was wrong. I mean, I think it's a correct answer. You know, you've got to think broadly. Now, by the way, some of you may have seen this. Who's been to an event of mine before? That is willing to admit it. Okay, well, if you've seen this before, you're precluded from participating. I don't know if I did it then or not. I don't know what I do any day. But if you haven't seen this before, I'm going to say something and I want you to act on what I say, all right? So I have here a $100 note. In America, it's called the Federal Reserve. Down under, it's called the Reserve Bank. Is it the Reserve Bank of South Africa? All right. I have here a $100 note. Who'll give me 500 Rand for it? Is that real money? What's your name? Sipo. Sipo. Let's give Sipo a round of applause. Did Sipo just make 500 Rand? Yes. Give him another round of applause. Yes. Did I just lose 500 Rand? Yes. You see, that's the thing. You all think I lost 500 Rand. Do you want me to do it again? I've got plenty to go here, folks. Remember, making a mistake is good. Repeating a mistake is silly. I'm not going to repeat it. So you think I lost 500 Rand. Did I not say that I'm going to do in 8 minutes what I normally do in an entire weekend? Am I willing to invest 500 Rand amongst 200 people? That's 2 Rand 50 a head. So that I can do something in 8 minutes, what would normally take me a whole weekend. Is my time worth more than 500 Rand for a weekend? You better believe it. So I did not lose 500 Rand. I have chosen to invest 500 Rand in all of you so that you might learn something. And the learning's coming up. You don't even know what the lesson is yet. But I want you to do something that will probably be very uncomfortable. It's probably the most uncomfortable thing you'll do all weekend or day, whatever it is, Tuesday. Which is, would you please all close your eyes? All of you do so. And go back to that point in time when I said, I'm going to say something and I want you to act on what I say. And then I said, I have here a $100 note. Who'll give me 500 Rand for it? What went through your mind the moment I said that? And when you remember, please open your eyes and raise your hand. Yes, sir. What went through your mind?
Yes, straight away.
Yes. You see what this is? He has the courage and temerity and the gumption to say, yes, I'll do it. But he didn't. It was a mental thing. Yes, I love making fun. He's sitting front row too. It would have been a short walk for him. He wouldn't have worn out much of his shoes. He wouldn't have expended much energy. But he sat there on his butt saying, yes. Great answer. Someone else. I know, you think I'm going to destroy all of you. Not really. Yes, sir.
I was thinking of putting my monies in the car.
You're thinking of?
I was thinking putting my monies in the car.
Your money's in the car? Oh, the money's in the car. Oh, you didn't have the money on you. May I have a show of hands? Who could not do the deal because you simply didn't have 500 Rand on your person? Look at all of you. And didn't some of you say before, but we don't need money on us? Okay, hold that thought. Hold that thought. Hold that. They're very interesting. Okay, yes, sir.
I just thought you were counting how many people were willing.
Yes, you just thought I was counting how many people. It's like there's a property for sale here in Johannesburg, and it's listed as, it sold last year for 4 million, desperate sale 3 million, and you read the ad and you think, I wonder if the real estate firm's just trying to get some people on their database. I wasn't even counting. I was pretending, and I thought, how slow are these people? I waved at you for a bit. Yes, sir.
I think my thoughts were, how could I walk up to you and deal you out of 500 Rand?
Yes.
It was like it was a bit dishonest.
That's so kind. I want to shake your hand. Here's a man with integrity. Thank you, sir. He didn't diddle me out of something I was willing to do. It's like, you see that property in Atlanta for $2 million. that's really worth 5 million, but you think, I just can't do it to that old dowager. I'd be diddling her. I'm going to let a member of the mafia do her over. Yes, I honor that. That's good. Someone else, couple more. Yes, sir.
We don't take action.
We don't take action. That's true. You think you do. You say, yes. He didn't say no. Someone else. Yes, sir.
Is the $100 genuinely genuine?
Is the $100 genuinely genuine? I asked my Kahoot in my scam here. No, we haven't met that I know of. So I asked him to check it. I even said, is this a real note? Not for my benefit, for your benefit. And despite having someone of your nation and your clan check that it's a real note, and he said, yes, it is, you are still wondering whether I'm diddling you, even though I'm here on stage, and you're going to assume that I'm just going to be lacking in integrity so much that I'll get 500 real rand and you'll get a photocopied $100 bill. Thank you very much. There's a deal. RJ's got a house, 120,000. It's worth a lot more. It's going to go up. I wonder if they're diddling me. I wonder if it's reproduction wallpaper and not the genuine article. Someone else. Gotta kick it along because they said 8 minutes. 2 more. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I thought, okay, here's an opportunity to double your money.
You thought here's an opportunity to double your money, and your thinking was absolutely right. But your actions didn't follow through right. So here's the lesson, folks. Because how you reacted to this deal today has nothing to do with a lousy 500 rand here today. It has everything to do with 500,000, 5 million, 500 million rand tomorrow, next week, next year. Because how you reacted to this deal is how you react to the real deals in the real world. It sounds too good to be true, so I better not participate. Why should I do this? Why should I be the one to make a fool of myself? Even if I do it, it's only 500 rand. It's not worth the risk. Yes, it's a good idea. Let's see what happens. I don't want to diddle him out of his money. How you reacted to this, in all probability, is how you react to real deals in the real world. I did this once, and a guy in the front row came up with 3 $20 bills. He said, he'll give me $50 for 100. He had 3 $20 bills, and he nearly did the deal, and then he changed his mind and went back to his seat. And afterwards, while I was debriefing a bit like now, I said, sir, would you mind explaining why you came up with 3 $20 notes, but you changed your mind? He said, yeah, I only had $60, not 50, and I wasn't sure if you'd give me $10 change. Don't laugh too hard. At least he came up. Only Sipo stood up. No, there was another gentleman. Sipo came up. Where are you, Sipo? Show us back row. It took a guy from the back row to come in. Man, there are some places where you do this, they run over each other to get here. They're on it. And their nations are doing well. Could it be that the way you all collectively react to this is symptomatic of why your nation's doing not as well as it might? It's possible, isn't it? I did it once in San Francisco. Who'll give me $50? People started running up. Some said, I'll give you 60, 70, 80, 90, 95, 97, 98. 99, and then one guy had to say, I'll give you $100, and he stormed up, and he pulled out a wallet full of dirty $5 notes and $1 notes, and it took forever for him to count them. I said, are you shorts 100? He said, yep, guaranteed. He said, come on, do the deal. So I swapped my crisp, clean, fresh, newly minted $100 note for this bunch of old, dirty $1 and $5 bills. And as he was walking back to his seat, I said, sir, I've got to ask you, would you mind sharing, why would you want to swap $100 for $100? And he said, well, unlike every other guy here tonight, I can go home to my wife and say to her that I did a deal with Dolf de Roos. Your attitude determines your altitude, folks. It does determine it. So what I encourage you to do is to stay awake today and listen up, because you've got a great lineup of speakers here. And if I had more time, I'd give away more $100 bills. But you've got a great lineup. And that's one thing. All we can do is provide the environment and the tea and the coffee. And you always get some people say that coffee was too strong and the tea was too hot. And you get those who don't care about the strength and the temperature because they've got gems of information that they want to run with. And this is just a standard, yet another real estate event, because what we're presenting here, what this team has come together to do is to present the new phenomenon in real estate that I think is going to take over. Those of you old enough to remember telex machines will know that they weren't very efficient. And then when fax machines came along, for the first time, you could get a facsimile of a document to anywhere else in the world instantly. You no longer had to send a courier in those days at $400 or $500 expense to deliver those documents and then have them signed and then have them returned. And it was transformational, and it did change the world. And sometimes it doesn't last forever because no one wants a fax machine now, because we all use scanned documents which are in color and much higher resolution, and we can email them to 20 people simultaneously, not a phone call and all that sort of thing. So what we're on right now is the cusp or the verge of a new phenomenon, not just in real estate, but in many industries. And I always say, and I'll come back to this point later on in the day, there are three kinds of people. There are those who make things happen, there are those who watch things happen, and there are those who wonder what happened. And you've got a choice of deciding which you want to be in. SIPO made things happen this morning. There's someone else who was willing to do it, but they weren't running against each other. It was barely a race. Most of you watched what was happening and, you know, you think, yeah, cool, I could have taken more action. And some of you are still wondering what happened. So in the coffee break, say, what was that about the 500 Rand? But this is a seminal event because we're on the verge of doing something great. You are. The world is shifting. It's a phase shift in the world. And I'm just excited to be here. Thank you for your time. I'll see you again later on. I'm going to hand back to our one and only host, Scott Pickens. Thanks, Scott.